2, 3, 4,
I was waiting for that.
6, 7.
So nice to see you all. Christy, looks like you're at home, huh? Yay. Glad to have you all join us. So we got, I suppose, a lot to cover. We're kind of reviewing some things we discussed last time, adding the additional information that was passed on that hopefully you all got, with some more kind of on the financial side of things, which Cindy and Michael go over with us. And then we'll talk some more about what we're thinking as far as options moving forward. So I don't know if we need to do any introductions. I don't see anybody here, but none of us know unless Cindy, you want to go into some of the other team. But like I said, I think we know everybody. So Cindy, do you want to go ahead and just jump right into your presentation?
I do, but if it's okay, I'd like a couple of things I wanted to mention first.
Sure.
And just, I wanted to clarify that when we do go to the board, we will be bringing them all the options we talked about, including option 1. Option 1 is still technically on the table, and it would cost about an additional $20 million at least. So the impacts of where that $20 million would come from is another conversation, but it will be part of the discussion so that the board knows all the options that we talked about. The other thing that is important, that we're kind of a little deer in the headlights, if you will, is that the numbers you see today, the costs that you see today, most probably, I would say, definitely probably will not be the same numbers going forward to the board. And the reason is that we are seeing extraordinary increases in construction costs. As we are bidding out Gladstone, we're seeing large increases, and we know that they will happen here. Probably 3 major reasons. One is just escalation in inflation of materials costs, and we don't see that abating probably for at least a year. Increases in labor and shortage of labor. And the increases in labor and the increases in labor costs and the shortage kind of go together. There's a lot of projects going on right now. And so competition is fierce. And so the prices are going up. So I just want you to know that, you probably already know it, but it's important to know that the numbers today, we're probably going to have to come with increased costs when we go to the board. We're trying to get that information now. It's very frustrating, but it is what it is. So no surprise to anybody. Any questions about that? Okay. So with that, let's see, can I share? I can. So one of the topics that we talked about, and I think Kim, it really started with your questions, which were great questions, is how do we get here? And so what we've done is a comparison of what the funding sources are that we've been working off of, what the original pricing was in the back a couple of years ago, what the assumptions were with that pricing, what we're looking at in the current PowerPoints that I've provided with you, and what the status is of that now. So I will go over them, and please, if you have questions, feel free to ask. So the NCPRD General Fund, the original source was, the original amount was 1.8 million. In the previous PowerPoint, we had that at 0. However, NCPRD staff have identified approximately $2 million in the general fund that could be transferred if and when the NCPRD board approves that. So we did add back $2 million there. Property sales proceeds, the assumptions were that there would have to be several properties that would have to be sold. We do have Hoodview proceeds, about $3 million. And we will continue to explore the other properties, but I think there's been some pushback on some of them. So we have put in a more conservative number for that. SDCs, no change. Grants, the assumption was that we would get $1 million grant from the Metro local share grant. Metro came out, and I don't know when it was before I was involved, and they did determine that this project was not eligible. So that's $1 million off the table. We will apply for the Land and Water Conservation Fund and Local Government Grant Program. I think those are each $500,000. Again, we're being conservative if we got either of them, and if we got the total amount for each. The library proceeds, no change in that. The elephant in the room, I think, is the revenue bond. And the assumption was at the time that NCPRD could fund a revenue bond for a few years, and they would have to go out for a Geo Bond. The problem with that assumption is that to date, no work was ever done to prepare a Geo Bond. It's not something that you can turn around very quickly. And I'm going to go over those in the next couple of slides. I think it's important to know that even with these numbers at the 23 million, we're still 0.8, almost 1 million to 3 million short. And the latest costs that we saw, which are still, again, back to option one, was 28.8 million. So even if we had this amount here of the 21 million, we would still be short. Did I go too fast? Any questions? Okay.
I have one question real fast, if that's okay.
Sure.
Regarding the property sale proceeds, you know, being that column, the first column, the original funding column was several years ago and property values have increased tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that at all as far as it being less now? It's just because there are a couple properties that don't want to be sold at this point.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, it's not want to be sold. Right now, what we have is the money still left from Hoodview proceeds. Both the Justice and Vogel properties, for individual reasons, we're not going to be able to sell either, potentially, or not in the timeline that we could use these funds. So we don't know if we'll even be able to get the 4.5 because we don't have enough numbers right now that we can get quickly on anything else that might be, but there weren't a lot of properties available back when this was first developed, which again was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there is money in there from Hoodview, but Justice and Vogel, which were originally named in the plan, are not as eligible at this point.
Okay.
So one of the things, I've gotten a lot of schooling on revenue bonds and general obligation bonds. And so the revenue bonds that were on the table, there's two different types of bonds, obviously revenue bonds and Geo Bonds. And revenue bonds typically are guaranteed by the revenues generated by the issuer. So oftentimes they are issued for transportation systems. So revenue producing entities. And so this property isn't going to be, as we've said in the past, is not going to be a great revenue generator. It'd probably have to be subsidized. So relying on revenue bonds in the long term, and the bonds were initially figured on a 20-year term, is not possible certainly not possible to get from the Concord school, and we just don't have the other source. The other is the Geo Bond, and Geo Bonds require voter approval, and they have to be very specific. Typically, Geo Bonds go out for multiple facilities. You don't normally go out for a Geo Bond for one facility, but you package them, and so you say, here's what we're going to do in all these various facilities for NCPRD. And so they would have to go out for a vote. And it has to be a very clearly defined plan with very clearly defined properties. In order to do a Geo Bond, we would need to have an updated capital improvement plan and a comprehensive plan, which we don't have. And so we would need a thorough public process to update those plans. And at this point, that work is just starting from NCPRD, but it's going to take 2.5 to 4 years to get all the information to prepare for the Geo Bond and hold an election. And you also have the potential outcome that the Geo Bond is voted down. So it's not unusual for groups to go out for Geo Bonds multiple times. So again, this becomes a timing issue with this project. I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has questions. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Christy had a question, it looked like.
Yeah, so with this timing, 2 to 4 years for a Geo bond, my mind goes to how was that a responsible way to put forth as a funding option for this project? It was not put out there very long ago to us as a group as a funding option. So I guess I am confused on that aspect.
All I can say, I mean, since none of us except Mitzi were here at that time, I think it was a goal, it was an aspiration that folks hoped that they could do. I don't have anything else, Chrissy. I wish I did.
Okay, and on the very first slide, can you, the 2 asterisks at the bottom, I didn't know what the definition of that acronym was on the bottom when you went through that.
Sorry, let me get that real quickly. The Astronaut, so we had initially the original estimate was 23.8 million.
Yes.
And so what we're showing here is that even if we got, got the 21 million or potentially 23 million, we would still have been short from the original estimate. And then we had another estimate from the CMGC, which is the construction manager general contractor that we are contracting with to oversee the construction of this project. When we got the new estimates from them of 28.8 million last fall, if we had gotten this amount of money, we still would have been short.
Okay, and so is that the person who is coming up with the new number that you're going to present to the county of the raised cost for materials?
Yeah, that company is who we're working with Optus and this company to review the costs, yes.
And when you come up with that number, will we be given that number, or are you just going to present it to the county board?
I think, as I said last time, I have to follow protocol. And so we don't have a definite number yet. And in terms of protocol of timing, typically the board gets the information first. We can probably give it to you the same day. I just don't know if we'll be able to do it ahead of time. Actually, the document itself that we prepare for the board will go to the board almost a week ahead of time. So it will be in that document. Whether or not we can do it before that, I don't know, Christy.
Okay, and we're not allowed to see that document when you send it in?
When we send it to the board, it is a public document.
Okay, thank you.
It does get posted, as far as I know. I think that's right. Sarah, is that correct? It gets posted, correct? Yeah. I'm 90% sure, Christy. If that's not true, I'll let you know. Other questions or comments?
Appreciate that work.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy.
Yeah, I'm clear. Thank you.
So that kind of brings us back to where were we? There's been, I believe my understanding from the District Advisory Committee meeting last week, didn't get a chance to review any of that, but I don't know if Jason or Mike, if either of you wants to kind of, for those of us who weren't there, sort of talk about what came up at that meeting that would be relevant, helpful to this group.
I would defer to our chair, Grover.
Oh, okay. Grover, go ahead.
Right, so there was discussion being as that is mostly focused on library going forward at this point, and the rest is not the big parts that will move forward. The group concurred on having the library be separate, and the rest of the details are beyond what they're going to deal with now. And it was made clear in some of the conversation that while some people refer to it as the library's park, it is in fact the Concord property park, and it has a library adjacent to it, as it does have a community center, et cetera. So that's the summary from my perspective on that meeting. Did I leave anything out, Mike?
No, other than it was a unanimous vote in an action item to approve the separated model.
Right. And in that meeting, as well as the library board meeting, we talked about separated, and in both cases, the definition of separated is going to be discussed tonight, and what that means, as opposed to, because the library board, which I'm also on, referred to it specifically as being, we would explore options other than option 3. Because we are committed to exploring all options.
All right, Grover, and you had your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, good. So it's on the topic of exploring all options. I had occasion to go back to the site a few times and re-looked at it, and I appreciate the drawing that was done showing a library along what we'll call the Olive Avenue side of the park. But that does show a library that is full size, and we're proposing or want to have it be considered. And for those of you who didn't have a chance to read the document I sent out, it includes quite a bit of information, but it speaks to the fact that, and I was happy that Mark pointed out, in option 1, it shows that part of the library is in one building and part of the library is in the other. The public part of the library would have been in the new addition, but it wasn't taking up the whole 19,500, which would, thank you, Ron, for your again reminder of the importance of how much can we maximize the amount of park. And so the idea of a 2-story building was refloated. It takes definitely an advantage of the existing terrain, topography, et cetera, the change in elevation. And it provides an opportunity to have a view that is above the Walmart, et cetera, as opposed to, and it also would be directly adjacent to the park. So there were a number of questions that have been posed. This is not the first time from our very first meeting of that we weren't going to be able to likely proceed with option 1. I've raised and others have raised the option 4, and it has not yet by this group been significantly considered to do something less than the full size, because y'all at options, what is the square footage on the drawing that you have for option 3 alternate B as a single story building?
15,000 square feet. Correct, Liz?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would have been it in total, and there would be nothing else as opposed to option 3, which is 15,000, too many papers. Option 3 is 15,150, of which 900 and so it's effectively moving option 3 over there. Is that more or less what that drawing is to entail, or more or less in square footage, because it's all but 320 square feet. Good. What we were proposing is the 1,200 square foot.
Excuse me, I think we're confused about option 3B. We don't know what you're talking
I'm
about.
not sure what you're talking about either.
Well, I'm just looking at the documents for this particular meeting, and it says option 3, 15,150 square feet, and the square footage of the public library part of it is 9,320. It's on, the pages aren't numbered, so I can't tell you what page it's on, but it's the presentation that was put out with the additions from the last meeting on the 3rd.
Grover, sorry to interrupt. I think, are you talking about, you're referencing the option with it on Olive that has the same footprint size as what we've presented in option 3, correct? Is that
Well,
what
when
you're
you use the
referencing
word
as
footprint
3B?
size, I don't know, because you made that a rectangle building and option 3 is not a rectangle building. So if in fact the square footage is approximately the same, then that's great. And that was what my question was about.
Yes, that's correct. The idea is that there would be comparable footprint sizes.
Right. And so in the comparison of sizes, option 3 was listed as being 15,150. And that the public part of it would be 9,320. And all I'm suggesting is by putting 12,000 square feet on the main floor and then having a daylight basement of 4,000 square feet, it had a whole lot of information about what the benefits are, but it actually leaves more room for the park. And that was a key piece. And it also doesn't have you looking into the back of the Walmart building down at that lower elevation. In fact, you're up probably somewhere close to 8 or 10 feet. So I just want to make sure under the promise of exploring all options, we don't get that dismissed. And unfortunately, in all the previous examples of me bringing it up, it seemed to be dismissed. And so that's why I sent out that piece. And we went over and looked at a number of things about the elevation and the elevation change. And by the way, Olive Avenue, it still goes down lower than that for where the covered play area is. So it's, I mean, it's a steep hill. And the examples that are being given don't take advantage of the hill. And if I live on a steep hill and I have a multi-level home because of it. So I just want to make sure it gets adequately considered and any concerns about it discussed. So it is be an option that is being considered, as opposed to so far it's just option 3 or move option 3 over to the other place. And it's still a single story and it's still eating up more square footage of the park. So that's what I wanted to start a conversation.
We can revisit this. I think we'll just say what we said before. I thought we gave a pretty thorough answer and had been considered, but the cost of a 2-story building is significantly more. You have to have 2 egress stairs, an elevator. There's still retaining walls. Kurt Lango, our landscape architect.
Okay, I'd like to interrupt. You're talking about a 2-story building and I'm talking about a 1-story building with a daylight basement. So it isn't necessarily 2-story. You can walk right out of this top story onto solid ground.
Right,
You're
but you're
saying
saying
another
the
egress.
entry to the building is, otherwise you have to hike up a hill around to the entry. Is that what you're saying? Plus there's the 4,000 square feet. That doesn't make sense for this building. We could, as I said, we could put a mechanical room below. The staff workroom needs to be at the same level as the library. Mitzi can probably speak to this in terms of functionality. There's very little program. I don't know where this 4,000 square feet you're coming up with at the ground level, but it doesn't make sense from a library planning perspective. And if you wanted to put a program down there, now you've got staff down below and above. They have to monitor who's using the restrooms. Yes, you could come up and maybe around the building, but the grade change isn't that great. We have, 12, 14 feet floor to floor. You're still going to have retaining walls. If your comment was, oh, this is going to be cheap because of the nature of not having to have retaining wall. We have an 8-foot tall retaining wall. It's not that big of a deal on the back side of the building. And we put bookcases up against it, a beautiful north clear story light. If you raise up above, as you're saying, yes, I saw the view of the hills, and that is lovely in the sky, but you're also overlooking a big white roof. You're not just looking across the roof. It's worse, Grover. You're looking straight down on this massive white roof. It's like, I just don't, and wait a minute. Wait, let me finish, because I'm just repeating what we went over.
I know, that's what I'm afraid of. You are just repeating. You haven't considered it newly, and I am disappointed every time you've given us these quick responses.
It's not a quick response. It's thought out. Plus, the idea is a building, a library in the park, and one side of it is facing back towards a big box retail.
No, I don't.
A more expensive option, And it functionally, I don't know, Mitzi, if you want to speak to what it means to have a 4,000 square feet of program
Sure,
below the
yeah.
library.
The only way that would work is if
Yeah.
basically there's a certain part of that space that's just closed off and only used when we're able to staff it. You could
Okay.
you could potentially put a community room, knowing that it had to be closed off and unless it were reserved, maybe storage space, maybe a staff lunchroom. But the majority of the staff area in the workroom would have to be upstairs just for safety purposes. You know, we have things that happen in the library and we need to be able to have all hands on deck at certain times. And it wouldn't work to have all of the space just totally disconnected from a floor.
Right. And that really is the point to be made, because out of the 12,000 square feet, and given that the option 3 shows 9,300 square feet, you still have room on the 12,000 square feet to be able to do those things you just spoke of. And as far as looking at the Walmart thing, I would like to think that at the low level, there'll be bushes there. And it is the looking above that is where the view is. It isn't, if we're not going to put any bushes along that ridge, then I really think we're missing the point. And that's one thing I loved about the tour with y'all, to go over to Vancouver. You guys did a great job using landscape and outside landscape, et cetera, to highlight and block things. And that's what I would consider would be applied to this, as opposed to say, you'd be staring at the top of the roof, which, no, I hope we wouldn't count on doing that.
And so Grover, you're assuming people are entering the library coming up at the upper level, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm considering that.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I don't
So
know
now
if
we
you got the
have-
document or not. Are you on the
Got it.
distribution list?
Elevator
get the-
and stair, got it.
Okay, and it will have a, so the other thing to look at is there anybody who could post the thing so I can actually point to the pictures? Mitzi, can you do that?
I
What was
think
that,
the
Grover, were
other,
you needing?
I would like you to post the PDF I sent.
Your attachment, let me work on that.
Thank
yeah,
you.
the other thing, just to complete my thought too, is just, there was quite a bit of discussion actually on this option at the last meeting. And there were comments about pulling the library away from the entry of the Concord School, and how there's a lot of synergy and shared relationship between the library and the Concord Community Center that is benefited from a closer proximity versus being pulled further away, as well as relationship to drop off. As I think Kurt Lango mentioned, there's a much more direct relationship to the drop off versus having to walk much further to get to the library. Not to mention the grade change coming into the library that I think Kurt did a nice drawing of to depict that.
Yeah, and there was also a significant reduction of just the open flexible green spaces as
Yeah.
well, as we moved the library over.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so that drawing is your drawing, but what I want you to see is it wouldn't be a whole lot different than that, except it would be a 12,000 square foot, which would give more space for park on the upper side. And you see the pathway that goes between the play area and the library? Well, is that going to be ADA path or not?
Yes, as it's shown in this drawing, it would be.
Perfect. So I just use that same ADA, and it's not the main entrance. The main entrance would be on the right end of that library, and it would have a stairway and an elevator and the community room. So much like the Happy Valley Library and the West Lynn Library, and also one other one, they all have a community, the Oregon City Library, they all have a community room that is locked off except when they have people to staff it and or they check it out to somebody else. So that's the Reading Library is not a two-story. That was my mistake. It was, and they made it only one. Oregon City, West Lynn, and Happy Valley all our two-story libraries in similar square footage to what we're talking about here.
You know, the flexibility of the meeting room being at the same level as the rest of the library. It's not that large of a library, so you're looking for as much flexibility as possible, like story time for kids, being able to take them directly across at the same level to a meeting room versus once you bring people down to the lower level, that who's doing that? How's that monitored? Who's monitoring the lobby? Who's coming up in the elevator or who's coming into the building?
Okay, good. So Jim, I just feel one bit of deflection after another, after another, after another. I do not hear this as a conversation about how it could work. It is only, and it's been my experience for you the last 3 times we've had any parts of this conversation, that's what I keep hearing from you. So you're already set that it won't work and it isn't being considered. And yet it is clearly the option of this body to look at all options. It's our mandate from the Board of County Commissioners to look at all options as opposed to, nope, that won't work. That's like brainstorming. Nope, that's not a good idea. And I don't appreciate that. It may not pan out. I am fine with it not panning out, but to have the answers come that fast that, nope, that won't work and that won't work. Because you know what? Have you been in the West Lynn Library?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so where's the kids and the story time and all that take place? Downstairs. So that's one place. Okay, and then same with the Oregon City Library, so they have the children's area on one level and then they have the story time over another area. That you went up or downstairs, they go up and downstairs there. So to say that makes it unworkable.
It's not optimal, I'll say that. And I know that a lot of this is working on the plans that we previously developed with Mitzi. It was always, how can we maintain these sight lines? You know, it was such.
But if the library's all
you know,
on one level, you got the sight lines. So we're not affecting that. That's the sight lines, having the library on one level. It's the other things that are not on that same level, just like with the idea of having it be in 2 separate buildings. You'd have to go through the causeway into the old building, down a hallway to go to those other things there. Yes, so there's no sight lines.
All right, Grover, I feel like Jim has done a fairly good job, especially in the last meeting and this one as well, as responding. I think it's time. I want to find out, besides Grover, how many other people on the task force are actually interested in finding out more about a 2-story option?
I am. This is Shonda.
Shonda, thank you.
Are we verbally
Mark
voting
raised his
or?
hand and Christy raised her hand.
Christy, you'd like to find out more about a 2-story option? Okay.
Just the
Is Ron your
viability
hand
of
up
it.
for that?
Ron, you had something to say?
Well, whenever there's an opportunity, I'm not raising your hand in response to your question specifically, but I just have a couple of comments about that are not going to lean one way or the other.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I was just going to say that first of all, I was glad that someone brought up the question of 2-story library, because from quite some time ago we've been told that 2-story libraries are not very workable, but we didn't hear a lot of detail around that, and it's good to hear this conversation because it explains things. And I don't pretend to know in comparing one library to another, what works or doesn't work. But I think it's good to have more information out there. And I've wondered myself, just because we see a lot of multi-story libraries, and just to assume that they're all not workable without any explanation of that is a bit confusing. So I'm glad we're having this discussion. I still tend to wonder, though, if there is a reasonable design for a 2-level library where some functions are on a different level, you know, how much of the square footage could be on a different level reasonably well without it causing a lot of hardship in terms of operational efficiency and the need for additional staff. You know, because we are kind of in that position of wanting to provide enough space for the library, but at the same time, not feeling like we have necessarily enough square footage on a single level to get us through for a long period of time into the future. So I understand the concern around that. And once again, I really value the comments that come from those that manage the library to tell us what is needed and what is not, as well as the consultants that have experience with this. So that's all I wanted to say about it. It's a good discussion. It's informative.
Thanks, Ron. I think one of the things that ought to be pointed out is that the Happy Valley Library, yes, it's a 2-story library. They're at almost 16 FTE in terms of staffing, whereas the Oak Lodge Library currently in their budget is paying for less than 7 FTE. So that's a significant difference that has to be accounted for. And you know, at any one time at our lowest staffing level at the Happy Valley Library, we have a minimum of 5 people there at any one time, and so it takes more staff to staff a 2-story library for sure. And we've been talking all along about we need to be building a library that we can afford to operate. Ron, is your hand down?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Gary, go ahead.
Okay, try to get that unmuted. I'm afraid we're muddying the water here by throwing out more options, and I'm afraid we might get into more of a mess if we don't go back and sort of revisit what we were doing last time, which was we were looking at the options 1 and options 3. And I want to make a motion right now to take a vote on options 1 versus option 3, so we can take something off the table before we proceed. I think most of us are ready to vote between those 2 options at least.
I'd second that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table that's been seconded. I'm sure there will be further discussion on that, but are people willing at this point to say if given the 2 options, option 1 and option 3? I know Cindy has mentioned, if we caught that earlier, that she will be presenting to the BCC option 1, just to know that that's an option that has been under consideration. And of course, it's the option that we originally had approved by the BCC. But how do people feel about? Raise your hand, I guess.
Can we see pictures of both again, just to make sure? There's so many option numbers floating out there that I just want to make sure I'm very clear on what we would be voting on.
Sure. Cindy, do you happen to have those handy?
Doug, can I say something here?
Apparently so, Mike, go ahead.
I have no problem with jumping to a vote, but I'm asking myself if it wouldn't be more practical to first take a vote as to whether we prefer a close or separated library building.
Are you meaning separate but close as opposed to separate but far, or are you meaning attached versus detached?
Well, one and 3 are attached versus not attached. But we also have a Bornefeld option, I'm calling it, for a close versus not close option. And so we actually have two decisions here. And I'm not sure which one we want to vote on first, that's all.
I think we have a motion, though. We have to deal with it.
Yeah, we do have a motion, so let's start by talking about that one. So you saw that. So this is the current, I believe, what we're calling option 3. Is that correct? Or it was?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
My computer is not doing well, so there you go. You want to see the other ones, Kim?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
So there's options 1 there. Okay.
I'm clear. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
All right, so given those two options, and given what we understand as far as the financial feasibility of both of them, how many people here would still prefer to go back, that Cindy goes back to the BCC and says our favorite option is still option 1?
Point of order, we are still in discussion and we haven't called the question yet, and we haven't had the discussion.
All right, further discussion on the motion.
Well, that's why my hand's up.
Yes,
Anybody else have their
okay.
hand up for that reason? Kim?
Well, I was going to address the 2-story library, so I can wait.
Okay, thank you.
Ron,
Was your hand up for discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one minor point as a point of order about this. You know, I was just going to say that the comment was made earlier that we took a vote on an attached versus a separated library. I don't recall actually taking a vote. And, you know, I agree that at some point we need to do that, but I don't think we did that. I think it was pretty clear that everybody was supportive of the idea of a separated library, but I don't think it was formalized through a vote. Just a minor point.
No, you're correct, Ron.
Okay.
All right, Grover,
And
go ahead.
I just want to clarify some of the details that were put into this preamble to the motion for the vote. Because first of all, in our last meeting and the meeting before that and the meeting before that, there was not fully agreement that we were going to have only option 1 and option 3. There was other discussion and the other was never. And so we get to deal with that today, but to have that be a premise that we'd already handled that and that's backtracking and so on and so forth. I do not support that or agree that, and we can go back and listen to all the tapes you want. But and the other is, by showing the pictures we're showing there, now we've agreed that option 3 needs to look like that, because I know that's how it happened when we were looking at a previous version that had almost all glass on the south end or the end that was closest to the Concord building when they were attached. And then and now we're in this thing with this big heavy overtop that makes it look like the 1936 building and so on and so forth, which that didn't have a chance to be discussed. That was just, oh, nobody stopped it. So now that is now what option 3 looks like, as opposed to it was like, we will talk about the exterior at a future time, and that never happened. So I just don't want to let those things be accumulatedly, well, we already decided all that. And the one thing I did want Mitzi to show it, we don't have to do it this minute, but in the stuff I sent were pictures of what the library looked like before. And if it's not going to be that close to it, or even it is, there's no reason that it has to replicate the 1936 building on the one hand. And the second part is, we didn't ever decide whether we could move the building farther out and make more parkland, because that just got talked about and went away. And now we're back to it. This is what option 3 looks like. So I don't think we have clarity other than it's 25 feet away. That's the only part that I'd like to say that we are clear about, as opposed to option 3 and all the trappings. So can we clarify that, or do we mean option 3 the way it looked?
I'm assuming we're talking about option 3 the way it was most recently presented by Jim and Opsis.
So then that means how it looks, the exterior's fixed, and all of that. That's option 3, because that's how it's been so far. If we don't stop something, it all of a sudden assumed that, well, we didn't disagree, so that's what we got. And I'm not interested in keep having that snowball. We're going to spend how many $1 million? We better have it so that us and the outer community can live with it and be happy about it, because we're going to have to go way out to make this work. So I don't know that we've agreed on. So if you're saying option 3, exactly the way it looks, and that's what we're voting on, versus option 1, which is a full size with part of it being in the old building, etc. If that's it, then this would be clear, but that doesn't mean we've agreed to option 3. Which are we preferring is the voice, that is what we're voting on. Is that correct?
I guess I'd have to go back to Gary, who's the one who made the motion.
Okay, Gary?
Yes, that is what we're voting on, is to eliminate one of those 2 options, and then we can go forward.
Right, but the 2 options are not set in stone the way they are. It is whether we want to have the attached or we want to have the non-attached, as opposed to it looks just like that option 3, and that's the one we just agreed to, and now we're running down the road to that one.
I think the cost of this thing is just going up like a rocket while we're sitting here arguing over these details. But the fact is, we're making it more confusing.
But I'm sorry you can't keep up, because I don't think
road.
it is more confusing. I think we just need to be clearer about what we're agreeing to, because I do not want to be tied to agreeing to something. So we're agreeing that option 3 has to look just like that, and that's what we're choosing, as opposed to picking one or the other. Which would we prefer? That I could vote on.
I think we're trying to get a vote of the members of the task force.
Yes. On what, Gary? That's my point.
Between options 1 and options 3.
A preference? Because see, you're
Yes.
going to lock in option 3 the way you put that comment out there. And I don't want option 3 to be locked in the way it is. And that's how it's been going.
Can we say that we're talking about the footprint, Gary, of option 1 versus option 3?
All right.
At least to get that part clear. Does that make sense to everybody?
Thank you. I'm just trying to clarify stuff.
Okay, any other clarification discussion on the motion that we have on the table? Kim, or I don't know if your hand's up. I don't know if you were.
I have a point later to make. I'm still reserving my time.
Okay, Christy, go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate my question in the comments. Are we just voting to eliminate an option so that we're narrowing down an option to still discuss those details of, and we're going to proceed talking about a 2-story option in addition to that? Or are we voting as this option 3 being our last and final option? I just wanted some clarity.
I believe the motion, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the motion was just to between those 2, is one of those preferable?
So no discussion about the 2-story building.
That would be going after, not at this point. It's not saying that we're not going to talk about any other options at this point. It was just among those 2, I think, Gary.
Right.
So process of elimination.
Take some stuff off the table.
Any other discussion for the motion?
Commissioner Savis's hand is up as well.
Yeah, Commissioner Savis, hello. I don't know
Yeah,
if you're wanting to speak to the motion that's on the table at the moment, or
Yeah, I guess in a roundabout way I do. And I appreciate all of you, appreciate the discussion. But I'm a little confused. And I think if the premise is, or the decision or the votes are going to be based on the financing of option one, whether or not it's sound, or option three, or whatever options, I think that's where I get confused, because I appreciate staff giving you a little bit of the financial picture. But either way, the conversation has been for a couple, 3 meetings here centered on the library. And I think that the discussion of what the park element or the Concord building element is or isn't is not really much part of this discussion. And yet there are financial impacts to that. So I would think that it'd be clearer if you actually voted on and just put the money aside, but for the sake of this, is to say, what is the footprint you want, or do you want a separated buildings? I think I've heard that often here. But if the conversation is only, and it goes to the BCC, only about the library and not about the remainder, I think we're leaving a big chunk of this out, not just the geography or the square footage of the property, but a large number of the elements. So I think if the discussion is going to be about library, then just talk about the footprint, because I don't think it's really relevant to option 1, 2, or 3, other than one's detached. But I think you need to define that in a little bit more granular, to the sense that we know exactly when you come to the Board of County Commissioners what you're really saying. So having that said, the other thing I would like to add is that one, if the costs are going up, it's very likely, I think it's already been talked about, that the Concord part of, or the NCPRD portion of this project could be phased. And my question would be and is going to be, not here tonight, but it's going to be, is that if we look long and hard at all the funding options, what could we do? What is the amount of money we could raise, stretching out everything as reasonably as possible? And then if that amount is, let's just say it's $20 million we can raise. And I think we can actually get there, frankly, by the way. How much can we build for $20 million today in the market? And can that be put into a phase? So I said 2 different things, but you have a vote on the table. I don't want to distract from that. But again, if you could just maybe focus more on the footprint and a detached, non-detached, I think it would give me some clarity, and probably everyone else clarity, is what you're voting on. But don't let the finances influence your decision one way or another, because it's going to get built one way or another.
all right, thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate that input. Dennis, you had something, part of the discussion. On the
Yeah,
motion.
I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but to me, I see 3 things that we're all talking about. Not well, the communication is not great, but separate or not, that seems to be one. The other piece is location. It's either closer to the community center or on Olive. And then the third piece is 2 stories. So if we were to vote, it feels to me that's kind of how that should go. Is it attached or separated? Take a vote on that. The location, and whether it's full 100% consensus or not, at least we have an idea. Is the location, is it close to the community center, or is it on Olive? The third piece, is it 1 story or 2 story? To me, maybe that's oversimplified, but I think that would move us somewhere, because I feel right now, so I start looking at the clock, we're going to be meeting again soon. So that's what I would say. Thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. I think that's a good point. I don't know, Gary, what you think about rephrasing your motion, and we start by having a motion of, do we vote for a detached versus an attached library?
We can start with that. It's a question just trying to get moving, because we just keep adding stuff to the conversation and it's getting more and more muddled.
Sure.
And I think we need to, as Dennis was just saying, separate out the various parts, but this is separating out the first part, doing this first vote.
Okay.
Can I ask a question quickly of Commissioner Savas?
Go ahead, Christy.
I'm just curious with his statement, if I'm understanding and processing this, is he optimistic, or are you optimistic that option one could be funded and be an option should we have this phased in approach that you're discussing? Is that what you're getting at, that option one may not need to go off the table? The only reason it's going off the table, I think, is funding, right? So that's what I guess I'm getting at.
Yeah, I would say that if you wanted to build something that was, again, I see option one as attached or detached, right? I see option one as 15,000 square foot library versus a 19,000 square foot library. So if you want to distinguish that, that's fine, but don't let the dollars, I would say, get in the way. I think there seems to be an overwhelming interest, despite the dollars. I could be wrong, that despite the dollars, let's just say the money was all there, which would you prefer, attached or detached? I think you need to do that. I like what Dennis said. I think you need to break this down so everyone's clear on exactly what you're voting for or voting on. Does that help, Christy?
To a degree, yes. I do feel like we are being told that we can't vote for a certain option because there is no money, though. So I kind of feel like what you're saying is we should have that as an option. So I guess I feel tied. We're in one way we're shown this spreadsheet that shows a $20 million deficit that it's impossible to fund. And then another option, is closer to being funded.
Yeah, and also that, phase or option one could be and is likely to be something to be phased. So just because we can't afford it today or not really certain on what the funding gap really is, doesn't necessarily foreclose that that's not an option on the table, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Kim, I thought I saw your hand up. Where you?
Yeah, I feel like what I was going to say is starting to become relevant. So I'll just say it if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Everybody at this point. So for context, this kind of stuff is in my wheelhouse. This is what I do as far as the two-story versus the one-story and the location and all of these things. I am a real estate agent who specializes in return on investment for sellers. So listening to everybody discuss things here, I think something that is really key to point out, and Jim discussed this last time, we were talking about the collection size and usability of the space can be the same or close to the same in a much smaller footprint when the space is efficient. So we're getting into this, we're getting very mired in this, like, must be this square footage place. I can say from experience that I've been in 800 square foot houses that feel like 1,400 square foot houses. I've been in 2,200 square foot houses that feel like 1,400 square foot houses. The amount of space is not necessarily what we should be focusing on. It's the efficiency of the space. With that said too, I think, I can't speak for Jim or Opsis, but being somebody who does this a lot, I think when Jim is saying it's not feasible to do this, I'm taking that and hearing it from a cost perspective more than anything else. I don't know what the numbers are, but I can hear from a client, like, I'm looking to do this giant retaining wall, and I can say off the bat, you're not going to be able to, that doesn't make any sense here. You're not going to be able to afford it. So it could be that Jim's not being callous. And again, I don't want to speak for you there, Jim, but you may just know off the bat that that's just really not cost effective in doing a two-story versus a one-story. I think the focus for the community is trying to preserve as much park space as possible. And that's why Grover is bringing this point up. Also, I think when we're talking about separating the building, moving it further away makes access to the community room in the community center less feasible. So that being part of the library versus being separated in a community center that's nearby may make it easier to have it be a smaller space. So that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Kim. All right, Gary, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that we're not talking about time as a factor here, and we've been meeting for 4 years, I believe. I think time is of essence, and we need to move on with this. We can't just keep beating this to death. So that's why I'd like to see it simplified and make some motions, make some movement in this process. I mean, we're losing members as I speak.
So back to then your motion. Did you want to rephrase your motion or remove your motion and add it, put forward a new motion?
Well, I would modify it, I guess, because it seems to be we want to talk about footprint. And I guess I would make the motion in terms of having option 1 footprint versus option 3 footprint, if that simplifies it enough for everybody.
Or I think Dennis was kind of hoping, and I kind of like what he was saying, the attached versus detached.
We can word it that way as well. But I think either way.
All right, well, let's hear your motion then, Gary.
Say again?
I said I think it's to you to make a motion.
Okay,
or unless somebody else wants to make a motion.
Let Dennis make the motion.
Gary, I think you need to withdraw your motion.
Okay, I withdraw the motion and defer to you.
And I guess I would make a motion to vote on the 2 concepts, one being separated and one being connected.
I'll second that.
All right, thanks. So any discussion at this point? We're going to keep going on that, or are we ready to take a vote?
Vote.
Grover, go ahead. Grover, you're muted.
Given what I just heard earlier in the same conversation, the issue about being separated or connected. If we remember, this group clearly picked as our first choice, connected. However, we discovered a whole lot of reality that was not given to us before about that we couldn't afford it, it can't be done, there is no money, there's things are insolvent practically. All that's what we had to live with, and the insults and everything. So now to just talk about separated versus connected, given that we already picked connected as our first choice, we just have to set that in a rearview mirror, I guess. And back to the question about, do we have to think about money or not think about money, or what our preferences are, it just becomes more and more muddled for me. So if we're going to leave it as separated with no concept of cost, or connected versus no concept toward a cost, that's what we're talking about. I just want to clarify that that is what in fact the vote is, and it's a preference. It isn't meaning, like we said, it's footprint and general concept.
I myself
So
feel there is a harsh reality of costs, and I appreciate Paul's comments. But I think Michael and others, Jim, and then we know cost is getting more expensive. So I think cost, for me personally, it is a factor. And I also worry about the connected. If we say, go ahead and we're going to roll in on the community center, does that happen with the library piece that would overlap into the community center? And I would hate to see that get muddled, that bridge piece from the library into the community center. So For me personally, I don't think the combined piece is going to happen. And so that's why I'm trying to move to what experts are saying is another option, separated. That would be less overall, it would allow the project to move forward.
So it is a funding issue then for you.
It is.
Got it? Well,
I can't take that away. I've heard it. I've read the data. So
the data we've seen.
amen. That's all I got. But I'm also trusting people. So I think as good as we can get, we've gotten in terms of that regard.
Ron, go ahead.
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable myself with the vote on the simplicity of is it connected or is it disconnected, because I think it depends so much on design, and I've gotten the sense that the disconnected library idea that has come up again recently is I realize there's a lot of interest in that, and I don't discount that whatsoever. But for me, it's more about the design and what the implications are of one design versus another. I don't mean to complicate this, and I realize we're kind of under the gun here, but there were drawbacks of a connected library, and we get that. There are also drawbacks of a disconnected library. And so to me, it's more about, what does the overall design look like, really? So if we're voting on option 1 versus option 3 based on what the design is right now, that's one thing. But are we locked into those designs necessarily, or are we still open to refinement? And I would like to hear more. Currently, we heard some reasons before about the concerns around a connected library. Okay, are those still the same concerns? Was that more of a knee-jerk reaction? That's kind of what the impression I got initially, which I believe I commented on. So is there some flexibility in either? I guess that's my key question here. And for example, the disconnected library, this may be a minor point, but I remember Mark in the last meeting making the comment that, maybe it would be an improvement if the footprint of the disconnected library were shifted a little bit to the, I hesitate to use direction here, but technically the grand entrance to the Concord School faces southwest. Okay. I'm sorry, not south. I may have this wrong. North is actually to the upper right-hand corner of the diagram. Okay, so south is to the southeast corner of the diagram. But anyway, there was a comment made about shifting the footprint of the disconnected library a little bit forward, more in line with or a little bit beyond the what we consider to be the front of the Concord School. And I'm a bit curious about that, simply because there could be an opportunity to, at least in a minor way, increase the footprint of that option on one level, which in effect would increase the functional space of the library on that level. You could shift not the entire footprint itself, but just the side of the building that is more or less in line with the front of the Concord building by 10 feet, and gain 1,000 or more square feet on that level. So what I'm getting at here is some flexibility in design, not just locked into a footprint as it is illustrated right now. The other question is, well, how far away from the building are we talking about? How close or how far away? Is it 25 feet? I'm okay with 25 feet, but is that what it is? You know, so it's not necessarily just disconnected or connected. It's where is it if it's disconnected? You know, and is there flexibility in how it's connected?
Right.
Yeah, I think those are aspects we would get at further as we went along. You know, both the Clackamas County Library Board and the Oak Grove Community Council have sent something to the Board of County Commissioners specifically stating that they unanimously approved the detached option. And I think what we're looking for here, and I'm hearing that from a number of people, is we're just trying to find out is if that's something this group would concur with. That we also think a detached option would be preferable, or if we'd prefer to have the library attached to the Concord School building.
So that what I'm hearing, I guess, is that there is some flexibility. You know, that's what I want to hear. There's still some flexibility, some adjustments.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, we're kind of breaking it down. We've got different things to be considering. We're just trying to knock some things out so we can find out where we all agree and what kinds of things we all need to come to an agreement on.
Okay. And I think it's you know, important for you know, those who want to kind of revisit what the reasons are for one or the other as well.
Thanks, Ron. Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just give my thoughts on this, and I apologize if any of you feel like this is redundant or a waste of your time. But we did spend 2 to 3 years working together, coming up with an agreeable plan. And the way we did that was that our voices were heard and felt valued, and we were able to make sure each person spoke their piece. We went down every avenue, every option to make sure that we thoroughly discussed it. Some of us cared a lot about preservation of the building. Some of us cared a lot about landscape. Some of us cared about whether it was a community center attached, you know, working together with NCPRD. There were different priorities along the process. And I feel like myself and all the people on this committee were very respectful to each other, to respect each person's preference. And what I'm hearing at this meeting, and when I hear people say, let's just vote and move on, is I don't feel valued. And I feel that a few people here are not being given the respect that they deserve to feel comfortable moving on with this vote or this process. And I apologize if it feels like you are being dragged through the mud and you would like to move on. I would have loved to have moved on too, but we all know this was out of our hands, being told that we have a $20 million deficit. We didn't ask for that, but we certainly have not been brought together to come together and be able to talk about it along the way. And so last meeting and this meeting really has been the only time as a group that we've been given this opportunity to voice our opinion. And we're not together. We are not 100% on board, but I think that every single person in this group deserves a chance to vet their concerns and be heard, because that's what we've done this whole process. And that's just my 2 cents. If this group decides that we really don't want to go that route, we want to rush this project, we just want to vote, we want to get it over with. I mean, what Commissioner Savas brought up earlier, to me, throws a whole loop in all of this. Like, do we need to go? I mean, we voted as a group that we wanted the attached library. The whole community got behind it. The only reason that all these separate groups are voting for detached is because we're now being told there's no funding. So we're trying to separate the library from the NCPRT building so that we can continue working on the library and not wait for NCPRD to figure out what they want to do. So things have changed because of the information we've been given. And I feel like we all need to respect each other and the need for each person's idea to be vetted. And I will drop it and not speak again if this board just wants to move on, vote, and be done.
Thanks, Christy, as always, for sharing your feelings with us, because I think those are some important things for us to be considering. I don't know if any of us would, any single one of us would like to feel like we're rushing to an uninformed decision, or that people are not getting heard. The making sure everybody's getting heard is absolutely critical to this process. And so I think it's just there's if it feels like it's being rushed, I think it's the feeling of none of us wants to be going in circles either. And that's, I think, where sometimes the discussion is feeling like we're going in circles without any feeling like we're moving towards any goal. And so I think that's why there's the interest in saying, can we at least agree on some part or another? Yeah, we had a plan. We had an original plan, got approved. We all felt great about it. And it's definitely thrown a wrench in the works to have it thrown back at us and say, well, you guys can't have what you want. And shame on you for even thinking so. I mean, sorry to get into that, but it's, I know that some of us feel that's how it came back at us. So I'm just, I think we're just trying to figure out how to move forward from here. And yeah, I wish I had answers, but we do have a motion on the table about saying considering whether detached or attached. It was pointed out, which I neglected because I don't know whether I know that the DAC, the North Clackamas Parks and Rec District Advisory Committee, also unanimously said that they would prefer a detached library. The only reason I didn't mention that was because I don't know if they actually sent something to county commissioners, but I'm sure that gets there at least at some point. But so there are several bodies who've expressed that at this point. And it's now to us whether we want to say the same thing. Christy, I don't know if you had further you wanted to add at this point. There, your hand is still up, and Kim, your hand is up too. So if there's more discussion on this, the motion that's on the table.
The only thing I wanted to say was, Christy, thank you. And I fully agree with everything you said. And also, inflation is real and it is happening. And every day we wait on this, the dollars that we have to work with are less valuable. So both.
Harsh reality we're dealing with. So that being said, we have a motion on the table to vote for whether you prefer an option of an attached library attached to the Concord school property or a detached library on the school property. Let's start with attached. How many people would prefer an attached library building attached to the Concord school property? All right. How many people would prefer a detached library building, detached from the school building?
Yes, for Shonda.
Thank you, Shonda. And Grover and Kim, I'm assuming those are your hands raised for that vote. Thank you. So I think that's unanimous from those of us here present. Dennis, your hand is up. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I don't want to talk about the location. I don't think we're ready as a group, but I am personally. My opinion is that I think the location, as I said last time, closer to community center makes a lot of sense. I'm ready to vote. I'm not sure we're ready to vote, so I'm hesitant to even put it out there.
All right, thanks, Dennis. So are there people want to talk more about the pros and cons of having the library located 25 feet from the building versus further away? Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I'm going to go back to the previous question. You know, I did not vote, but it means a lot to me to hear that both the Parks District as well as the Library Advisory Board would prefer a detached library. You know, so I have to assume that there are good reasons for that, and I would go along with that vote for that reason only.
Thanks, Ron. Grover, go ahead. Oh, you're muted again.
Having been in on both of those votes, I do believe both of those votes, I can't speak for everybody's head or wherever, but just like tonight, it's affected by whether there's money to do it or not, whether we can count on moving forward with the library, or we're going to have a greater delay. And given that we've been struggling with the library issue for, I don't know, 14 years or something like that, and we're in a undersized 8,000 square foot, and yes, we only have 7 staff, but we only have 8,000 square feet. So I do think the money had something to do with it, and it's a better bet to not be tied to what appears to be and has been advocated as being uncertain funding. So from the library side, a chance to move forward separately influence those votes, as I think it did in this conversation. So that's just in response to what has been said. Can't speak for anybody other than myself, but I don't, even in this conversation, it is not clear that that decision wasn't in part, well, at least the library can move forward because that is more certain funding than what's known or not known on the other side. So that's the piece I wanted to add about that. Where we go next, I'll wait to hear what somebody says. I have my ideas where we should go, yes, but.
Well, if you have ideas, Grover, you're welcome to make a motion, or at least share more about what your thoughts are on that, as well as anybody else.
Okay. And I apologize if I'd like to let Mark go first, and then I'll speak after him.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'd like to let Mark go first, and I will speak after him. His hand is up.
I see that. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to, before we first of all, I think we're running out of time, so I'm not sure how much time we've got to talk about any more of this. But I wanted to make a suggestion, perhaps on a way that we could move forward. And this is it. So, I've been an architect, for a long time. So I have to suggest that in the previous firm that I used to work for, we used to do a lot of things that were bad. We used to draw a lot of things that were bad. And the reason we'd do that is because sometimes we had to draw it to kill it. And what that means is you have to draw it in order to look at it and in order to understand why it doesn't work. And sometimes you find there's some parts of it that may work and most of it doesn't. So we used to have this saying all the time, you got to draw it to kill it. And so I think my suggestion is that there could be some real value for us to have that discussion about close together, far apart, 1-story versus 2-story. And I know that's more work for Jim and his team to do. And I really applaud you, Jim, for making some really good comments tonight that I take to heart about some of the reasons for a single story building. And there are some really good points there, as well as Mitzi. And so I think I'm just suggesting that maybe the one way to do that is just maybe to give Jim and Liz an opportunity to maybe draw very simply this out for these two options, close and far apart, 1 versus 2, and let's look at it, and maybe that will help us with a decision.
Thank you, Mark. And just as one quick tail on that is that for me, I want to make the distinction that I am not an architect, nor have I played one on TV. The distinction between the cost of a two-story, I know in a house is one thing, but then as opposed to the daylight basement, and the daylight basement, I'm not, but part of it, the part on the ball field park side, that's going to sit on undisturbed ground as I would see it. And yes, then it goes over, and the other part, the daylight side, would be coming from the other side of Olive Avenue in the Olive Avenue right away. And so the structure that holds the closest to Walmart side of the building up will be a wall that goes the full distance. And the other side will not be a two-story. It will be a one-story sitting on undisturbed ground. And that for me is a difference between two-story, because I know when we talked about the parking structure, it was about it had to be two-story. And so I let that one go, but I'm still on all of those looking for ways we can have the maximum integration of what we have to parkland. And parkland ain't cheap. That's the part we got to be clear about. So every extra 2,000 square feet of park we use up, first of all, we can't get any more. The piece of property is a finite size, but that means we just blew that much in property that possibly could be another way. I'm following up what Mark said. Thank you all.
All right, Cindy, go ahead.
All right. So when this came up a couple of meetings ago, we asked this committee if you wanted us to pursue anything with OPSIS, understanding they're not going to do this for free, and it does take time. And y'all said, no, don't do that. So we said, fine. If you want to go through this now, again, you can certainly request that. It will push everything back. So I'm not trying to make threats. I'm just trying to say the realities. If we have OPSIS do a design, it will cost money and it will take time. So it's unclear what y'all want to do if you want us to move forward on this.
Well, I believe, but it's not, we're not going to vote at this point, I think, on this, but for my sense of things is there are a handful of us, and I'm certainly one of them, who we're quite happy with the option 3 that OPSIS presented to us, the detached building and the layout, the way it looked, that whole presentation. I really liked it. And I thought it was doable. I thought it made good use of the park space, the way Kurt kind of laid out how the park could look. But we need to take time to consider more options. As Cindy said, that's going to be expensive and time consuming, but we do want to make sure we need buy-in from everybody. When we go to the commissioners, whenever that is, we want to make sure that they are hearing from this task force that we've got something that we are 100% behind. It's rough doing that, and I think that's what Christy was kind of getting at. We spent years coming up with something that we were 100% behind, and now we're having to go through it all over again, and it feels like reinventing the wheel. And yet we're trying to do that in a couple months rather than a couple years. So that's where I'm seeing some frustration from several folks, and I just want to put that out there. Gary, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to reiterate sort of what you just said, that I'm happy with option 3, and I don't want to spend more time, don't want to spend more money. I would rather just proceed and go ahead with option 3. That's my position.
Would you say you felt like you were settling for option 3?
Yes.
All right. Dennis, go ahead.
Cindy, a question for you. So your next commissioners meeting, you had mentioned, I think last meeting, that you all would be making a proposal. We as a task force may make a proposal, and then there would be input from other people. Did I get that right?
Kind of, sort of. We will bring forth the feedback from all of the groups, the votes and anything, whether it's a vote or not, if there was, consensus. We'll bring that information to the board. This will be done in a policy session, not a business meeting. And policy sessions do not have external non-county folks presenting at them. So we will present the information from the various community groups, and we will present staff recommendations to the board.
Simply a presentation to basically no one other than to inform.
Well, we will be making recommendations, and we will give, typically in a policy session, you state what the issue is, what you've done about it, and then you give the board options. And then staff say, this is what we recommend, but the board can go with what staff recommends, or they can choose one of the other options. So they do get a list of options.
Okay. Good, thank you. I guess just then to attach on it, I appreciate Doug's comments. I'm probably in the same camp. I was impressed with the work with the detached but close. I felt like we were given a pretty good insight. I don't know if you want to call that 30,000 feet or 20,000 feet, but I had a sense for the feel of the building inside and outside. And I liked it. I think that's the way to go, but I guess a related question to move the building to Olive, and maybe it has to do with a little more information, but the fire lane road, and there's an additional expense for that. Isn't going to understand it. We're bringing fire trucks down. Anyhow. I guess I just go on record as saying I like the proposal we had, and I would move forward with that if it was up to me.
Thanks, Dennis. Grover, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one of the things that has come up in library conversations, but not in this group, and that is the issue we have with our current library location and homeless people camping on the front and back door. And my concern is if we put those two buildings close together, given that already in the unmanaged areas, there are homeless people. I'm sorry that that's where they are, but unfortunately they're sleeping on that site now. And I have a concern of setting us up, having those two buildings there with that little alleyway, which would be a great place to be out of the weather and yet whatever. So that's one of the issues. The other is I'm a great believer in what's been implied by several people, that we work on consensus, not one vote more for one thing is better. And so that wins and everybody else doesn't win. That's piece one. The other is this issue about hurry, hurry, hurry. Well, it's going to go where it is. And whether we jump on it now or not, I don't want to be disappointed with an $18 million expense that far does not deliver the dream. I have been personally involved in this project, as have several other people, for 7 years. We used to meet once a week to look at this when we were no group at all. So the point of it is to all of a sudden spend 7 years, and now that we got to quick make a decision, and do you want A or B or blue or green or etc. Look, $18 million is not something I want to make a quick decision on. I have a lot of trouble buying an electric lawnmower or not for a difference of $200 one way or the other. So I like to look at the details, but I also really want to feel good about it. And so to be rushed because we got to know right now. And then lastly, this is a body that was specifically mandated to provide recommendations to the county commissioners, as is the library board, as is the district advisory committee for NCPRD. And to say that the staff will make recommendations regardless of what those groups said, which is what I heard Cindy just say, that makes me disturbed that our recommendations is why we as volunteers and the taxpayers are doing all these meetings. So it isn't a staff decision. It is recommendations from us bodies and all the time and energy we put into it. So that's my 2 cents on that. And I don't have enough information to say that I don't think Olive Avenue is a better one, because we don't, just to say it costs more. Well, wait a second, but we got more park out of it and there's more advantages, et cetera, none of which are on the table. Thank you.
I just want to be clear. Staff does not make a decision.
You
Staff
said
will
you make a recommendation.
Staff will make a recommendation. They will also show the feedback. The board will see the feedback and the recommendations from all the other community committees. Just like we did the last time, the board, after meeting with you, and we made a recommendation. The board doesn't have to go with that recommendation. The board makes a decision. We will look at a variety of different factors, the things that we've presented here, and make our best recommendation. The board will have our information and why we made a recommendation. They will also have the information from all the community groups. They will then make a decision, which may or may not be in agreement with staff recommendation. That's happened before.
Thanks, Cindy. So just so I'm sure you're all aware, we're well past what we were scheduled for end meeting time, and we do need to allow time for public comment if there is some. So, but I see there's still several hands up. So if we could get a few comments in, so we can get on to public comment, that'd be great. Dennis, go ahead. Oh, you're okay. Ron.
I was just going to say just a few comments about option 3. I have liked option 3 a lot myself. I like the synergy between the buildings. I like what I'm hearing about the operational efficiency. I think it's a good option. If it's going to be freestanding, I think we've lost some things by the buildings not being connected. We've lost opportunities for some cost savings. But that clearly appears to be the preference, to have them disconnected, and I'm fine with that. The one thing I'm concerned about is the comments about what happens in the future when it's no longer big enough, and now we need more library space than what was approved. And so I mentioned this a little before, but I would like to know, not with detailed design, not with a lot more expense in design whatsoever, but is there an option, or is there a possibility of that footprint, or that library design of option 3 being partially expanded upward in the future to gain more space, so that it does become 2-level, but become a 2-level in a way that is operationally still efficient. It's like, it may be a cursory analysis. That's all I'd be asking for, if that's possible. I think that's an important thing to consider. What I would not want to see is a push towards expanding the footprint of the building 20 or 30 years from now, which obviously would take away more of the park space, and create more of a controversy among different groups as to whether or not that's appropriate. So it'd be good to have some sense of that as we move forward, if that's reasonable to ask. Otherwise, I like option 3 a lot.
Thanks, Ron. Kim, go ahead.
So I just had 2 things. First and foremost, I just wanted to say that I continue to be really impressed by all of you on the task force and respect all of you and your opinions. I really appreciate everything you have to say. I think for me, I like option 3, and I'm just going to say I urge my fellow task force members to think in terms of collection size, the way that we can utilize the space in the community center as well as the library for things that the library might normally need, the urging of librarians about the efficiency of the space. And also, I recommend for anybody who's concerned about the size of the alley to actually map out 25 feet and see it's not a small space. And I think alley might be a misnomer for that if you can't actually see it physically, and it might alleviate some concerns.
Thanks, Kim. Gary, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to throw this out. I won't go into great detail, but keeping the library closer to the Concord School building keeps it farther away from the Oakfield Fault, where on Olive Avenue, it's almost sitting on it. And in a lot of states, it's illegal to build anything on top of a fault. GRI went out there and dug trenches and found that the Oakfield Fault was right where it was put on the US geological maps. And whereas it may not have moved much in the last couple thousand years, nobody can say that a large subduction zone quake, which we're overdue for, couldn't set it off. The average time between subduction zone quakes around here in the Northwest is 246 years. The last one was 322 years ago. And this would be a big one. This one would be a big one that'll last for about 5 minutes. So we don't want to get too close to that fault. That's it.
All right, thanks, Gary. Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate, again, all the conversation, and I think when people make decisions, no matter what they are, the best decision is made with the best information and the most information. And you guys are more informed than some of the other groups that have voted, for a separated library, for example. So I just want to say that, at least I can speak for myself, that as a commissioner, I always look for a group such as yourselves, that's what you're tasked with, is, you are making an informed decision, whatever that decision is. So I'm going to put value on that. And I think that we would look at all the other comments, secondary to the work that you're doing. Hopefully they complement one another. But I think more importantly, what I do want to say is that ideally you all get a consensus on what that is. If you are all split, then it's going to make it difficult for the commissioners to discern really what the message here is. So whatever you all come up with is important, and I will put weight on that. I think everyone should. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Grover, you've got a quick comment.
It's quick, and it just came up in the chat as well. I chuckle that if an earthquake, is a matter whether we are 50 feet off of the fault or on the fault. I don't see it makes any difference whatsoever. I find that challenging. And as far as the 25 feet, I actually been up there with a tape measure and several other people that are on the district advisory committee and on this body and on the library board. So and we actually did measure it, and we do know what 25 feet is. It is the current space between the existing building and where the fence is. That's 20 feet exactly, so you can see what 5 feet more is. And it is an alley at 20 feet, no doubt. 25 isn't much wider, that's all. But so we all gotta, if we have a big one, it doesn't matter whether you're 50 feet or 500 feet from the fault line.
All right. So I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know if we've got any members of the public that are out that would be interested in sharing any comments at this point beyond what's already been put in the chat. But we appreciate everybody being here. But Jessica, I don't know if you see if there's anybody raising their hand to add a public comment. If you could let them in.
There are no hands raised at this time. Jan Carruthers just raised her hand 1 second.
Thanks, Jessica.
I
Hi,
appreciate.
Jen.
Hi there.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate the quality of this conversation, and it seems to me at this point, with everybody expressing their particular opinions about what they're in favor of, I'm not sure that you have grounds for making a suggestion. I mean, a knowledgeable comparison of the two options that you're considering now, moving, one location or another, one level or a second level, without having more information on the newer option. And so I really want to just support what Mark Elliott said about the power of actually being able to answer some of those questions. There's, it's going to cost a lot more. It'll be this. And I appreciate that people like option 3 because they can see option 3. They've got beautiful pictures of option 3. So I just suggest that you invest the time if you're going to have another meeting. And I'm trying to imagine how it will be different when you open the next meeting from where it is right now. That's all I would suggest. Thank you. Thanks for all this work.
Thanks, Jen. We appreciate you being involved. Well, I guess we need to meet again. I don't know at this point what kind of direction to give as far as asking OPSIS to do more work on an option with 2 stories, but there is some interest in that. And I don't know if it's enough to say let's do it, but I if we're trying to consider those things and rule them out as has been suggested, then I guess that's up to the design team to go from there. And I suppose we're meeting again. I guess Jason, will it be up to you to see what see about coming up with a schedule for when to meet again, and see where we go from there. Christy, you had some thoughts?
I just didn't know whether or not we should vote, and if that matters. It sounded like you weren't sure about maybe the percentage of people who wanted to go down that. I know I saw a couple hands raised, but if the overall consensus is that we don't want to use the time to do and go down that route, I mean, I'm just putting it out there that I'm not, maybe we could make a definitive answer or, answer to that question today.
I would just love to see a show of hands if who's not comfortable moving forward and not make it formal yet.
Kim, Christy, I'm not quite sure. Does one of you want to make a motion, or what do you want to do? Just you're wanting a show of hands regarding
just a general, like, informal, who is not comfortable moving forward, deciding to investigate the current option 3 further yet at this point, who needs OPSIS to do work like that, draw it, even if it's a bad idea thing first before they're ready to move forward with something else.
You mean for the daylight-based version?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because we have option 3, which has been evolving all along. And the other thing that a number of people have been texting me about is that in the materials that I sent out, there are pictures of what the library looked like before we decided to make it a replication of the beautiful historic Concord building, and it's a standalone and it has its own glory, but this library isn't it. And so it will take a minute if Mitzi could bring up that and show those 2 pictures. I would appreciate that. And that's going along with furthering what you were saying, Kim, is at least we're sort of keeping it fresh in people's minds. Besides this geology conversation going on about earthquakes in 50 feet or 500 feet. My apologies for making that statement. I do not have a geology degree. Can you do that, Mitzi?
Cindy, the attachment is at 6 p.m. in the chat, if you want to pull that up.
While we're waiting for that, Kim, Christie, are you thinking, would you like to see a show of hands of how many people are currently preferring option 3 as it stands?
I would say
For example?
rephrase it as who is not comfortable moving forward with option 3 and further exploration of option 3 yet, and needs to see more design options from OPSIS first, informally. Can we see show of hands of who's not comfortable yet?
Before we do that, I'd like to show those pictures. And if you're ready, it's page 3, Cindy.
Trying to figure out which, excuse me. Here it is. Okay. Go.
Christie, is what Kim was asking, is that kind of what along lines of what you were asking as well?
Yes, and I might actually rephrase it that who is
There we
willing
go.
to move forward at this point without doing any further research.
Okay, thanks.
The reason I want to bring this up is imagine this building with that 2-story glass, even though it was really only a 1-story building, having a daylight basement about 50, 60 feet farther behind itself and to the left is what we're talking about. And it showed well in the drawing that they had showing where the path goes up between that, but it would look like that. And the end of the library would look like that. It still has the brick that shows that it has a relationship to the original building, but it isn't the original building. And the next picture too, Cindy, next one down. That one, it's just the same thing from a different angle. That's a different kind of, it's still a brick, it still fits, but it's not part of, and that one. So I just wanted to have those be fresh in people's minds because people haven't seen those pictures in a while. That was January of 2021, way back then. That was the master plan at that time. So I'm willing to let people talk about where they are. I appreciated what Mark had to say, that until we actually, and what Jan had to say, until we can actually get some idea of what these extra costs would be, which seem to be the big determinant of a daylight basement, and having it be standalone. As it is right now, if you go to the current library, you have to park in the back and walk all the way up. I understand the new Happy Valley parking lot's going to go away and they're going to be able to have to walk farther to get to the library. So it's not a big deal to walk from one side of the parking lot to the other, which is about how far, it's not even as far as the parking lot is wide, farther apart or not.
I think it's also important, I just want to make sure people understand, it's not just OPSIS doing a drawing. We will have to cost everything out and and put that whole package together for you. So it's not just Jim and Liz and their staff doing a drawing.
All right, so Kim and Christie have asked people to, how many people would like to see the design team put more time into researching further options beyond what's been presented to us?
Christie, is that your hand up for that or for something else? Okay, good.
And Ron, I can't tell where your hand is or not. You've got, did you have a comment you want to make? You're muted. Ron, you're muted.
I can't tell where my hand is right now either. I'm more interested, I think, in knowing a little more about the opportunities around option 3, because I guess I am convinced that closer to the existing building is a better way to go. But I kind of voiced my opinion on what my concerns are, and that's about the need for future expansion. And is it reasonable to design a building with 15, or I mentioned the possibility of 16,000 square feet being expanded upward for at least a portion of the footprint, for future expansion, and have it be a reasonable way to manage a building. But like I said, I don't mean to complicate things, but that's an important consideration, is what happens with the very likely need for more space in the future.
Thanks, Ron. Kim, go ahead.
So even though it is not my personal preference, I think there are enough members of this task force that are interested in pursuing more information from OPSIS in a different option that I'd like to put forward a motion that OPSIS create a 2-story option to present to the group.
As long as
I
we're
second
distinguishing
that.
two-story from daylight basement, because I
Correct.
don't know, I'm not an architect, those aren't the right things, but they're built differently.
Yes.
I know what you're saying, Grover. I mean, so
Okay.
daylit, lifted up, hitting the topography, so, yeah.
All right, so we have a
I'll
motion.
second that motion. We're spending $18 million or more already.
Okay, so we've got a
So
motion.
moved and seconded.
Any more discussion on this option, on this motion, excuse me?
Shonda, I can't quite remember what the motion is, but option 3 with a possibility to build a second story in the future would be good. I also definitely like the old original pictures of more glass at the entranceway. It's light and airy and inviting instead of the bricks on the top, which seem oppressive and top heavy. So if there can be more glass on the exterior of possible option 3 that can be added onto, that would be my.
Okay, well, the motion on the table is as to whether to ask whether this committee would like to see further research done on a 2-story, such as the one that Grover has been suggesting. It's all in favor.
Cost it out.
Yes, it will involve costing it out and a number of things, but yeah. All in favor of that motion?
That's 5 people I see.
Yes,
And
I'll find him.
Shonda, which way did you vote?
I voted yes.
That's 6.
Okay. Opposed?
Looks like 4.
Okay. All right. So I guess we'll see the design team take that where you will. Yeah, we're going to need to meet again, presumably. So Jason will work on coming up with a schedule for another meeting sometime in April, presumably sometime in April.
Yes, the meeting won't be for a while, and I have to be honest with y'all. We're gonna have to see how much this is gonna cost. You know, if we're, and you know, we'll talk, and but if it's gonna cost a whole lot of money, we're gonna have to come back to you. You know, and I don't know, we had talked about design for a couple $100,000 last time, I think, wasn't it, Jason?
Yeah.
And so it's not small change. And again, I just wanted you to be informed about decisions you're making. So, and I will have to go back, obviously, to the board and to Gary as well to talk about this. So, and I will do that because that's what you would like to do, but I just want you to know that.
Christy?
I just guess so, Cindy, I guess that I wish that information, it sounds like you're saying it's not going to be approved is what it sounds like you are saying or getting at, but it sounds like that information should be given to us long before we're voting for it. So I guess I feel frustrated that we come to an agreement, we come to a process, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna try to say that, but probably not gonna happen. So I just feel frustrated with that statement, I guess.
And I am sorry, I'm not trying to frustrate you or not trying to be, I don't know what the word is. I'm just trying to, there's realities of, moving things forward. And I just want you to know that it's going to take some time to do this. And we will come back to you when we can. But it's the reality of the situation. This was, we had talked about this, as I said, a couple of meetings ago, and you all said, don't do anything on it. So you didn't. And so now you want us to do something on it. And I need to make sure that my bosses all are okay with that and spending the money on that as well. And again, I will bring it forward as this is what the task force has voted. But I just want you to know that we have to go through a process as well.
So my comment is that much along what Christy said, it's like, we've got 4 years invested, well, 3+ years invested in this task force, and we followed all the guidelines and used all the information we had, and we made our best choices. And then, oh, well, I guess it didn't work. So now, like Christy said, we're asked to make decisions without exploring all options, which was very clear. That was spoken in the Board of County Commissioners. I'm happy to go testify before the Board of County Commissioners to talk about the option to consider all options, as opposed to, well, no, you got to pick either A, B, or C. No, nothing else. So we're talking about $18 million, and we're supposed to be the ones that get to have a say about that, not the final say, but as far as what our recommendations are. So I appreciate your point, Cindy, but I'm feeling quite pressed by that. And so we'll see how it plays out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if the board's fine, everyone's fine, absolutely. But I just can't, what I'm saying is I can't say, yes, it's going to happen without talking to the board and my boss.
Yeah, but I do want to correct, and you can go back and check the minutes. I have never been one who said it's okay that we don't have to check anything else. And you said y'all said. So I want to be clear that you don't speak for all of us having said that, because you can check in every meeting. My comments have been talking about considering other options. So it isn't we all said we don't want to look at anything else. That I don't know where you get that. Not from the minutes from the meetings that I was in.
Ron?
Yeah, just very quickly, and this goes without saying, but I guess it needs to be said again. We didn't put ourselves in this position. We were kind of put in this position. So we really shouldn't have to take the brunt of it. If there's a need for more discussion, there's a need for more discussion. That's all.
Thanks, Ron. All right, everybody. Thanks for all your participation. Thanks for sharing the ideas. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Doug.